Top story on ABC News Breakfast. The US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says Pakistan has agreed to reopen NATO supply routes to Afghanistan. The move ends a 7-month standoff after a NATO airstrike that killed 24 Pakistani soldiers.
Pakistan's change of heart follows an apology from Washington for the killings. The incident had caused a serious diplomatic rift between the two countries. Well, for more, we're joined by our North America correspondent, Jane Cowan. And Jane, why did it take so long for this to be resolved?
Well, Andrew, that's exactly the question that's being asked here in Washington. The sticking point all along was the fact that Pakistan was requiring this explicit apology, but it appears that the Obama administration was really split on the wisdom of that. The US State Department, on the one hand, had been urging for a long time that the word sorry actually be used to resolve this, but the White House and the Pentagon, on the other hand, were resistant. They were saying that an apology wasn't warranted because there'd been fault on both sides in this skirmish that actually ended up leaving 24 Pakistani soldiers on the border there. It's also worth noting that politically it's quite difficult for America to come out in an election year where Barack Obama, the president, is being accused of being weak on foreign policy and apologise to an ally like Pakistan. In the end, the statement that we've ended up with is really something that appears to be quite carefully calibrated to meet Pakistan's need for the apology, but also to avoid a really full-throated sorry from the US. It uses language like we and talks about mutual regret on both sides of this equation. But the US State Department spokesman Victoria Nuland didn't get off completely lightly. She was pressed by reporters about exactly why it did take so long to say the word sorry. Let's have a look at what happened.
There were a lot of issues that needed to be worked through. You saw us do that at the technical level. You've seen us do it at the political level, and that's brought us to where we are here.
Well, I guess the question really is, why did it take so long to come out and say sorry? I mean, this isn't an Elton John song here. Sorry isn't the hardest word to say. It's pretty easy to say.
I think the
why, you know, it's not a question about about parsing the statement. Why did it take so long?
Well, as we've been clear about for quite these many weeks, there were a number of issues that needed to be worked through that allowed us to get us to where we are.
Well, Jane, obviously sorry is hard to say, so how significant is this?
Well, this is very significant, you have to say. It does end, as you mentioned, a 7-month diplomatic standoff, a stalemate. It means that the supplies to US-led NATO troops in Afghanistan can begin flowing this way again. Having to have used an alternate route through Central Asia, a more circuitous route, has apparently been costing the Allies something like $100 million more per month in this period while the Pakistani border's being closed. So this is a huge advantage. And it also is something that will make it a lot easier for the US to go through with its drawdown of troops from Afghanistan as that war winds down. And it also really starts to get the US-Pakistani relationship back on track in all sorts of areas, not least of which cooperation in the fight against terrorism.
Jane, you talk about those relations between the two countries. Obviously, they are very difficult at the moment, particularly Americans. Many Americans consider that Pakistanis have something to answer for as far as the deaths of American soldiers in Afghanistan are concerned because of the supposed link between Pakistan's intelligence and militant groups.
Yeah, well, you make a good point. This agreement is going to do not necessarily much to resolve these long-standing issues that percolate constantly through the relationship between the US and Pakistan. There's a troubling sense here in America that Pakistan is really the kind of ally you have in the fight against terrorism when you don't really have an ally. And those doubts, of course, were laid bare nowhere more so than when Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan. The US State Department spokesman Victoria Nuland was asked today whether the advent of a new leader, a new Prime Minister in Pakistan, will do anything to give the relationship between the two countries a kind of a fresh start, a clean slate. Victoria Nuland wasn't really building that up too much, so it's pretty clear that the same old issues will continue to dog this relationship for a long time yet.
Jane, thanks very much.